back to my kitchen, guys. It is fall, and I know for a lot of people that means that it is like pumpkin season, but for me, I love it because it means that it is finally soup season. So I thought I would show you guys a few of the soup recipes that my family and I are all going to be enjoying this autumn. So for the first soup that I'm going to be making, I am going to do a sausage and tortellini soup. This is one that is pretty simple. There's not a ton that you have to do like to prep for it, which I really like. This is a kind of what I would consider a weeknight soup. I'm going to start by browning a pound of just a mild Italian sausage. I just grabbed this out of my freezer earlier today. I have cooked it straight from the freezer plenty of times. That works great too. If you do thaw it out though, it makes it a little bit easier because you want it to be just really bite-sized pieces. Since it's going in a soup, you don't want giant pieces of one thing and then smaller pieces of another. So I like to make sure that that is thawed out. And then I am going to turn my heat up a little higher than medium and just start to get a really good brown on that sausage. While my sausage starts to brown, I'm going to start working on a kind of a side, I guess, to go with my soup. So I don't love to make soup just by itself. It's a great thing to make in the fall for sure, and in the winter to kind of warm up our tummies, but it doesn't really fill our tummies as much as I really need it to. So I am going to make some like mini margarita pizzettes. May have made that word up, but just tiny little bite-sized pizzas to go along with it. So I have just my basic white bread dough, and I'm going to split this into 12 even. I'm going to split this into 12 even pieces. I may need to flour my hands. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to split this into 12 even pieces. I'm going to give my hands a wash and check on my sausage, and then we'll come right back to these. And I turned my heat down on my sausage because it was starting to brown a little too quickly for me. So now I'm just going to take my little dough balls and just kind of press them out into like tiny little pizza shapes. I'm going to get all of them pressed out, and then I am going to start assembling them. Okay, so you can see these are not like crazy fancy or anything. They are super rustic looking, but that's okay. That's what I want. So I have my oven preheated to 425, and while I start to get everything else chopped up, I'm going to stick these in the oven just to kind of start baking, just like you would a pizza crust. My meat is all browned, so while my tiny little pizza crusts are baking a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and start adding in the rest of the ingredients for this. One of my favorite things about this soup is that other than the sausage, everything else is kind of just like dump and go. So I am going to add 2 quarts of bone broth, chicken bone broth to this. I'm going to turn my heat up as well. And then to that, I'm going to add a can of diced tomatoes. I'm not draining this can at all. This is just going to go in directly like this. And if you have tomatoes that have the basil and oregano, I think is what's in it, the Italian tomatoes, then you don't have to add any other seasoning unless you just want to. But I don't have that, so I am going to add in a good healthy portion of Italian seasoning. I'm going to give this a good stir. I'm going to put my lid on my pot, and I'm going to cook that away. All right, so I have some Roma tomatoes, and I love these because they're just a great size. And I'm going to cut off, I need 12 slices in all, so however many tomatoes you can get out of that. And I want not like paper thin slices, but I also don't want really thick slices. All right, so our tiny little pizzas are not done cooking, but that's okay. I don't want them to be. So I have just some fresh mozzarella slices. You can grab these from tons of different stores. I get them from Sam's. You can get them from Aldi, several different places. So I really like the flavor of these. I also really love the size of them and that they come pre-sliced. So every one of these little pizzas is going to get a slice of this cheese on top. We'll just do that. It's not pretty, but it works. Okay, and then on top of that, we're gonna do a slice of tomato. Then we're gonna do just a quick drizzle of olive oil on top of that. I only have my big jug of olive oil, so I'm going to kind of improvise here. And then I'm just gonna add some flaky sea salt on top of that. Not a ton, just a little bit on each tomato. That's gonna add some flavor to that tomato, and it's just gonna give a nice little salty punch right there at the end. All right, I'm gonna stick these back in the oven at 425, and I will show you what they look like when they're all done. So in the few minutes that it takes my little pizzas to cook, I am going to finish up my soup. So I have a good hard boil going on my stock and tomatoes and the sausage, and I'm going to add a block of softened cream cheese into that. You can add it from the refrigerator and let it heat up in the soup, but I found that that takes a lot longer. And then I'm gonna add a bag of just the cheese tortellini to this. And that is it. It is very simple. You can add spinach to it at this point as well if you wanna have some greens in there. I don't have any spinach at my house right now, so I'm gonna skip that step. I'm going to bring this back up to a boil, let the tortellini cook all the way through, and then the soup will be done. And as soon as the little pizzas are finished, it's gonna be time for dinner, and that was very quick. So here is our soup all done and ready to be plated up. It's a little bit creamy, and it's got those tomatoes in there, that sausage, and of course that tortellini. It's a really delicious, delicious flavor and really quick to put together. And then our little pizzas turned out great. I ended up turning the broiler on just for a couple of minutes just to kind of get some brown bits on that cheese, but it is done. So dinner is served for our first soup night this year. All right, the second soup that I am going to do this week is salsa chicken. And this is like a Mexican style chicken and rice soup, I guess. So I'm gonna start off with some olive oil in my pan. I'm gonna heat that up, and I'm going to put some chicken in my like deep saucepan. And I want that to get nice and browned. I'm gonna salt and pepper it, and I'm gonna cover it and let that chicken cook really well. Alright, we still have a little bit of oil in our pan. Popping a little bit. Now that I took out the chicken, so I'm gonna throw in maybe about 2 tablespoons of flour into the oil that I still have in there. And I'm gonna cook that just for a minute until that flour is cooked all the way through. Try to scrape up a little bit of that on the bottom, but I'm not too worried about that right now. So I'm gonna let my flour cook, and then I will start adding the next ingredients. So my roux is cooked. It even got a little bit brown, which is great. So I'm gonna add 2 quarts of chicken broth. And I'm gonna add 1 can of black beans that I have drained and rinsed. And then I guess the secret ingredient for this recipe, if there was going to be one, is just a container of salsa. So this is just from Aldi. This was the 16-ounce container. And that's gonna give us some vegetables, and it's gonna give us some flavor, which is why it's called salsa chicken. And then the last thing that I'm gonna add right now is 2 cups of, I'm using basmati because that's just what I have, but any long grain rice would work. All right, I'm gonna give that a quick stir. Then I'm gonna put the top on, and I'm gonna let this finish cooking. And in the meantime, I am going to make some quesadillas to go with this. All right, our rice is almost completely cooked, which was really the only thing that we needed to cook in that. It's looking really good, but the next thing that I am going to do is pull out some of this just liquid, and I'm gonna add it to some sour cream. What this is gonna do is make sure that that sour cream, or at least give us the best chance for that sour cream to not curdle. So this is called tempering it. And I'm just bringing the temperature of that sour cream up so that whenever it hits that hot soup, it will stay smooth. I'm gonna add that back into my soup. And go ahead and turn my heat off. I don't want this to get any thicker. But I'm gonna add my chicken back in and then our soup will be ready to eat. All right, so this is our dinner tonight. We have our salsa chicken soup. So it's super filling with the rice and the beans in there, and it's super flavorful with all of those salsa flavors in there. So this one's gonna be really good. I'm pretty excited about it. And then just to dip in it, I made just a few quesadillas. So that is going to be our dinner tonight. All right, guys, for our dinner tonight, I am going to make a creamy chicken noodle soup. And the first thing that I am going to do with that is get some olive oil in my pan, get it heated up, and then I'm going to add about a pound of boneless, skinless chicken breast on top of that and go ahead and salt that. And then I'm going to let that cook and brown and get the bottom of the pan really tasty. And while that is cooking, I'm gonna start chopping up my vegetables that are going to go into my soup. My chicken is cooking and it is starting to brown and it already smells really good. So I'm gonna get started on chopping up my vegetables. So I'm gonna chop up some carrots and some celery, and then I pulled out the frozen bag of onions that I had in my freezer. These are already chopped, and I'm gonna just go ahead and put them all in the bowl. That way, whenever it's time to add them to my pan, everything is really easy to just pour right in. While I am waiting on everything else to cook, I'm gonna get started on our bread or our side for the night. And I just have my basic white bread dough that I always make, but this time I made it with einkorn flour. It's gonna have it a little bit, maybe a nuttier flavor to it. But it's an ancient grain. It is an all-around healthier flour, so I decided to go with that one tonight. So I just have a 9x9 baking dish here, and I am going to put my bread dough down in it, and I'm going to just kind of spread it out as much as I can. So this is after the first rise. I'm gonna have this rise again in this pan. But before I do that, I am going to add a couple of things to the top of it. So I'm gonna add a little bit of melted butter and some granulated garlic on top. This is not a ton of butter, just a couple of tablespoons. Don't need a lot. Oop, one there. And I'm just gonna brush that around. And then I'm gonna cover this and I'm gonna let it have its second rise while I get the vegetables sauteed. All right, our chicken isn't cooked quite all the way through, but that's okay. I'm gonna leave it in there just for a little bit. And I'm gonna go ahead and throw our vegetables right in to our pot with that chicken. I'm gonna give the vegetables just a quick little douse of salt, not a lot at all. And then I'm gonna just kind of mix those around to get enough oil all over them. Then I'm gonna cover my pot and let that chicken finish cooking and get those vegetables to saute and start cooking down. You know what? I have a little bit of extra butter, so why not, right? I'm gonna throw that in. I don't want that to be wasted. That way I can have the flavor of the butter in there too. I probably would not do that. I wouldn't add butter to it. I wouldn't add butter to it if I didn't already have it right there, but since I do, I don't want to be wasteful. So our mirepoix is pretty much ready. It is kind of browned and softened, so I'm gonna add a decent amount of garlic to that. And give that a stir. And then I have some thyme sprigs that were in my refrigerator. I just happen to have these. They don't look amazing, but they'll work. So I am going to just pull off some of the leaves and drop those in there. I'm gonna give that a stir. And before that garlic has a chance to burn, I am going to add 2 quarts of chicken bone broth to this. I'm going to cover this, bring it up to a boil, and then I will add my noodles in. I preheated my oven, and this has risen really, really nicely. And then the next thing that I am going to do, if I can open them, is I have a package of these pearls, these fresh mozzarella pearls. And I am going to take these and just kind of dot them all over and push them down a touch. This is why I went ahead and let this rise again, because I wanted to be able to like kind of push them down a little bit. So I'm gonna finish this out and then put this in a preheated 350 degree oven, and it will cook for about 20 to 25 minutes. My stock and all of my vegetables are boiling, so I am actually going to add my chicken back in now. Oop, if I can keep from dropping it. All right, then I'm gonna add just some egg noodles to that. About that much. I don't know, I didn't measure it. And then I am going to cover this and let it come back up to a boil, and then turn it down to simmer, and I'm going to simmer it for about 20 minutes until those noodles are completely cooked through. My noodles are almost all the way cooked through, so the last thing that I am going to do is add some heavy cream. So I have about 2 cups of heavy cream, and I just heated that in the pan that I had already been using to melt the butter for our bread. So I am just going to mix this through completely. I'm gonna give my noodles a taste and see if they are done. And if they are, then our soup is ready to go. They need a few more minutes, and I'm gonna add a touch of salt to it, but that is really good flavor. And I'm gonna let that finish simmering, maybe for about 2 to 3 more minutes, and then dinner will be ready. Dinner is all ready for tonight. So this is our bread. It kind of sunk down in the middle because I took it out before it was completely cooked through, and I didn't realize it. So then I had to put it back in the oven, but it is done now, and it smells so good, and I'm pretty excited about digging into that. And then our soup is also all finished. So we have our creamy chicken noodle soup and our garlic cheese bread for dinner.